Hi guys, this is Funky Bones and today I'm coming at you with a glued hairline tutorial. Now the purpose of something like this is to take a wig that you might already have, or if you're looking to save a little bit of money in material costs, and just take a normal wig that doesn't have a natural hairline, and we're going to create one today. So you can do this either in the front of the wig along the hairline, which I'm doing today, or if you're doing say an updo sort of ponytail style along the nape of the wig in the back. What you're going to want to do is order a wig, or if you already have one, have a wig that has plenty of hair in it because, for example, this wig, I farmed some hair at the front of it to do this. Either that or order from a place that has spare wefting in the same shade. The wig we have today is Arda's Buttercup in light copper red. This wig has a sort of skin patch along the front and a part line along the side. So I was able to farm enough hair out of the front for what I needed. But like I said earlier, if you aren't sure, it's probably best to order an extra package of wefts. But if you're doing something similar to me, the Buttercup is perfect for this. Now I'm just going to list off some materials I'm using alongside of the styling footage here. Now, if you want to style a wig like this, which the tutorial's not about, there's plenty of tutorials about it. It's called like a finger wave sort of style. It's a very common staple drag method. It requires a lot of teasing, a lot of hairspray. Usually I crimp style my wigs to get that volume, but this time I'm just following similar methods to that. So for materials other than the voluminous wig that I've already mentioned, you're going to need a lot of hairspray. So I like to use Got2b, as plenty of people do. You're obviously going to need various combs and brushes for this. The bristle brushes help to detangle and comb out the hair after you've teased it. A teasing brush and some combs. The best comb for this task is a rat tail comb. They're the combs that have the narrow little tapered tail look to them. You'll see why later, but you pretty much use the tips of these a lot more to manipulate the ends of the hair and direct them where you want them to go. You'll need a lot of duckbill clips or flat clips. You want these rather than the curved ones because the curved ones tend to leave behind an impression in your hair as you're styling them, whereas I find the flat ones just hold it in place where it needs to be. You need a hairdryer. You need clear tacky glue. The brand I use is Aleene's because I found that it's pretty much exactly what I want. It doesn't leave behind too much residue or anything like that. You need felt in as close to the wig color as you can get. I used brown because the only other color was a neon orange, which would, if there's a gap in the hair, you're gonna see it. Whereas the brown would just look like kind of like a shadow. You'll need probably some hot glue. I used hot glue in this, but if your clear glue is fine, that's fine too. Some sharp styling scissors and a wig head with a stand, but make sure you cover your wig head in Glad wrap because the Glad wrap will protect it and stop your wig from becoming permanently glued to the wig head because we're going to be using a lot of adhesives and things like that. You also might need spray adhesive and a hair straightener. This is all dependent on how you're styling your wig. I also like to use a steamer for a lot of my styling. The steamer tends to, if you've teased your hair a whole lot, you've obviously distributed a lot of hairspray throughout the wig. The steamer kind of helps to not only heat style your wig, but it almost in a way reactivates the hairspray. So as you're setting your wig, it penetrates a bit further down into just the surface you're working with, and it kind of liquefies, then solidifies the hairspray again, and it allows it to reattach itself. You obviously don't want to do this too many times because it does end up kind of removing the hairspray a little bit, but you know, 2 to 3, 4 times maybe is fine, but make sure as you're going along you're just adding more hairspray back into it. Before attempting your hairline, you want to pretty much style your wig about 70 to 90% of the way. You don't want to mess around with it too much after you've done this because while it is quite secure in terms of being able to wear it and things like that, it's not super secure when it comes to yanking it around and teasing it. It's not a sewn in weft, it's glued. Like you can pull it out, you can tear it out pretty easily. It's always best to style your wig before you do any of this as far as you can. You can see I style all of the back and I leave the rollers in the front. And then I start teasing this. So this is going to be the foundation of my glued hairline. Because of the way I want the hair to sit, it requires a lot of teasing. It basically needs to be gravity defying. The best way to tease this is it's called the ripping method, where once you've teased it, you grab the hairs and you pull them sideways, almost like tying a knot. And what it does is it pushes the teasing down into the root a bit further. You can see me do this a few times. I tease it, then I brush it out, then I tease it again. Don't be afraid to tease it as many times as you need. Brush out the surface layer with a bristle brush. Using a bristle brush pretty much means it just brushes out the surface layer of it, so you have like nice hair on the top. Don't be afraid to tease it and brush it out as many times as you need. You basically need that volume, you need that height. You're not going to mess it up too badly. It's always best to get it at that point where you're happy with it than to kind of do it and have it flopping over constantly. Here you can see I'm still kind of working away at it. I'm brushing out the top layer just to make it as smooth as I can before I really get stuck into the hairline of it, and I'm just adding some more teasing on the underside of it. Because I'm adding more hair in, I'm not too concerned about brushing out the inside surface, so I'm only really brushing out the outside surface of this bang wave that I'm making. I'm also just spraying a lot of hairspray in it and hair drying it down, but using my hand to press it flat. I'm also using my steamer to kind of reinforce this. I'm kind of trying to give myself a good foundation to build the hair up on, but as long as it's flat and doesn't have any bumps in it, that's what I'm looking for. Teasing wise, it looks like an absolute bird's nest under there, but it's more the surface profile that I'm concerned about there. But you see me brushing out the top layer because that's going to be visible from the outside. Even though more hair will be added to it later, get it as smooth as you can, and you can just make sure that the hair's laying flat over the top of it a lot nicer. So you can see how there's a couple of lumps and bumps and gaps. That's okay because I know I'm adding more hair again later, but you can always follow this method and add, if you have hair left over, add a bit more hair to cover that. So don't panic about that at the moment. Just make sure you're getting your foundation and your profile right. Like I said, tease it, brush it out as many times as you need until you're happy with how it's sitting. Because that's the main thing. You don't want this falling down after you've glued your hairline because it's going to be near on impossible to get back in there and fix it. Now comes the part where we plan out what we want our hairline to look like. You can see me still messing around with the top layer of hair. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I start drawing out the general shape that I want. I also mark out the center line of the wig. I'm just going to do a cheeky little widow's peak there. I've also marked an area where the part line is, though I don't end up transferring this to the felt. This is up to you. It just helps you orientate it a little bit better. Just make sure you do it in a pen or a chalk pencil or something like that doesn't show up too much because this is your front layer. You can also see I've drawn directional lines for where the hair is. This has helped me cut in the sort of jaggedy shapes into the felt. These are going to be the guides for how I'm going to style the edges of my hair to kind of give more of that pulled back, like scraped back sort of hairline. If you're doing anime wigs and things like that, you can make this a lot more pronounced. You can make this a lot more flat. I generally prefer to do this because I think it looks a bit more natural, and if you want, you can make the hairs a bit softer, and it's actually pretty close in appearance to a lace front, at least from, you know, a couple foot away. So it works quite well. You can see me continuing to hairspray this underneath part and just kind of pressing it down with my hands. The whole edge of the wig is still sticking out maybe 3-4 mil, a bit too far, so you kind of want to have like as close to a perfect slope up from the felt as you can, because if you have any sort of bumps, lumps, ridges, whatever, it's going to show up in the hair as you're working on it. I'm also about to cut a strip here of felt that I kind of fold in half a little bit just to put along that edge where the wig meets the felt. Because like I said earlier, it is sticking out a little bit, and that will, if I was just to add hair over that, I'd have to do a lot more layers because it's going to show through. I like to fold it kind of, not quite in half, like an offset half, so there's a little tail sticking out, because then I can glue the folded edge up against the wig, and then it just sort of gradients down a bit nicer into the felt. So we're adding more glue into this area. This is just going to help keep it down a bit later. I'm also using hairspray to kind of flatten it. Because the glue does take a few hours to dry, it's always best to say maybe do this, you know, and then leave it overnight to dry to really give it a chance to set. Because I was trying to get everything moving along, I would wait a little bit between each step just to give it a chance to firm up a little bit, but it's not fully dry. It's always best to, if you have time during the week, just do a little bit and then leave it and then come back to it the next day, just to really give the glue a chance to set and hold your work in place before you move to the next step. If you don't have any hair clips that fit the area specifically that you're working on, or the hair clips kind of like working against you and pulling your hair up and out of place, you can always use some, I'm using some T-pins here and a piece of elastic to kind of hold the hair down. Just be aware that the elastic will stick a little bit to the glue, so just be careful as you're pulling it off. It's always best that the glue's fully set before you pull the elastic off. It might leave a little bit of an impression behind depending on how much glue you've put in it. If you've put quite a lot of glue in, it obviously will leach through to the front and might leave a little line or anything like that. But for what we're doing, we're adding more hair over this area anyway, so that doesn't really matter to me. It's going to get covered up. You just pin one end down, pull the elastic tight, and then put the other pin down. Try and stick the pins in at an angle, it just helps them not pull themselves out. I'm just putting a bit of glue on my finger there's a bit of hair sticking out from underneath that I'm a little bit worried will be visible at the end, so I'm just, you know, poking it back underneath and neatening things up a little bit. Try and use, where you can, your rat tail comb. It's better than sticking your fingers in there, because your hands are kind of warm. The glue tends to set on your fingertips, and sometimes you don't notice that you've got like a thin film stuck to you, and then that gets stuck to your wig, and then you just have like this crusty cornflaky mess that gets mixed in there. Not good. So it's always best to try develop a habit where you can use your rat tail comb instead of your fingers for a lot of things if you can. You can see me rolling the glue off my fingertips as I'm saying that. I always think if you have the time, it's better to use not hot glue. Use, you know, like the clear tacky glue that I'm using or something like that. But if you're in a hurry, hot glue works. But as long as you know that the wig is going to be in a environment where it doesn't get too hot, it's fine. The other type of glue is a lot softer and more flexible, but I'm not using all that much here anyway, so it shouldn't matter too much. And it helps just to really make sure that it's stuck down as flush as it can be, because that's the main purpose here, is we want the felt to meet up flush with the edge of the wig, so we've got a good flat foundation to transition up into the hairline properly. Felt's good for this because it's quite a thick material, even though it is in sheets, so you can kind of just like shave off parts of it. Just putting a bit more glue in some spots. You don't want to put too much hot glue in either, because it is just melted plastic really, end of the day. I want the hair to stick to the felt more than the hot glue. If there's hot glue all over the surface of this, then it's not going to stick down too well and peel up later. So you want to use the tiniest bit of hot glue you can, shove the nozzle underneath it rather than gluing along the surface of it, just making sure that it's not inhibiting any of the areas where you might want to stick hair to. I'm just using my rat-tailed comb to really squish it down, making sure it's as flat as possible. And now I'm using some of the tacky glue, just going around the edge between where the felt meets the hairline of the wig, This is just to, while it's not going to set fully until once I start working on it, it just means that once the wig's been sat there for a few days, as long as I don't pull it off the wig head, it's going to give it a chance to really set and make sure that that felt doesn't come away from the hairline. I'm just steaming this slope a bit more just to really get it flat, just so it transitions nicely up from the hairline. These flat clips work quite well just to help create that shape without me sitting there with my hand against it the entire time, which, while it's fine most of the time, some people are really sensitive to heat and don't have thick skin on their hands, and it can get really hot and actually burn you. It's a lot easier if you can just find some clips like this and just let it sit. Because the hair is heated, it does need to reset in shape as well, so you can't just kind of hold it and then go, oh, that feels cool enough, and walk away when it's probably not fully set yet. You can see here that I'm just putting some pins and clips in just to move the swoop out of the way, because I want to work on this area. I don't want any of these hairs of the front of it getting caught in the glue or anything like that, so I'm just moving everything out of the way. So I'm walking around the back of the wig now with the hair that I farmed from the bangs. This is about the amount of hair that I'm working with, so make sure when you're doing this, when you cut it, just to put it aside so you don't get tools and stuff tangled in it, because the last thing you want to do is waste all that hair that you farmed off it by getting it all tangled up and messed up. It's really important that you pull away short sections and keep it as neat as you can. This section's about a little less than 1 centimeter, but you can work in like centimeter widths. It's always best to work in smaller widths just so you don't get overwhelmed. It's really easy to mess up and either put too much glue in or accidentally knock a piece that you're working on and push it out of the way by accident, things like that. So it's always best to work in small segments like this. Get a pair of sharp scissors and do like an vertical feathering sort of cut. You can use feathering scissors if you want, but I find that sometimes they're a little bit too harsh, so I just do it by hand and use just a sharp pair of scissors. Make sure you brush out all the little bits that you've just chopped up. Brush the tail of it too, just to get any loose bits. You can see that's kind of the look that you want. The tacky glue you want to put on the felt. Sometimes you can see towards the edges when I get to that, there's not that much felt there, so you just move the tacky glue up into the wig a little bit. You want to use a decent amount, but you don't want to use too much. And what you do is you get some hairspray, so you spray the front and the back. You can see as I start to smooth these on, some of the glue coming through to the front. That's okay, but sometimes if there's too much, it doesn't dry enough that you can't see it anymore, which I pretty much anticipate because I always end up having to fix it anyway. I'd rather use in some situations more glue than less. So you see those little dark spots coming through the hair. That just means that it's very soaked, very saturated. Use your rat tail comb instead of your fingers for this. Like as I said earlier, you don't want to transfer dried glue into it by accident. It also helps you, if you're using less glue, you can use the rat tail comb more like a needle and just sort of comb it through that way, rather than using the comb end. Just sort of use the end of it to brush it through. It all depends. You kind of see what I mean a bit later. I do it a little bit. But mostly smooth it, put a bit of hairspray on, put it into the points if you want to do that, hairspray it, really get it set into that shape, clip it down so it doesn't move, and then go get your next piece. Go get your next piece again, brush out either end, the top and the bottom. Make sure you've got a pinched grip in that spot where I'm holding it, just to really make sure you're not accidentally letting go of more hair than what you have to. Do your feather cut. The way I'm doing it at the moment is I'm doing kind of a roughly straight line, but as you get towards the edges, which you'll see later, I'm cutting more of an angle feather into it. Get the brush out the little hairs just in case there's some. Hold it in your hand. Try and flatten the hairs out as thin as you can. Not too thin, but thin enough. Spray either side. This just kind of starches the hair a little bit just to stop it from traveling too much while you're trying to work with it. You don't need a lot of hairspray, but just enough to get either side. The hair shouldn't be so thick that you've got any loose hairs in the middle. put a bit of glue on. You can see that I've crept the glue up onto the wig edge a little bit this time rather than just on the felt. Place the edge down, hold it in place with your hand, use your rat-tailed comb just to smooth over the surface. I'm using the tip of the rat-tail comb a little bit, and then I use the edge of it, just getting the glue through the hairs, through the fibers, making sure they're all there through. I'm just holding it while I'm moving my hand up, and just getting that clip, holding the hair and the hair before just in place while I move the clip. The hairspray that I added to the first piece earlier kind of holds it in place, but you definitely don't want that falling forward or falling out of place at all. It'll ruin what you've just done. Just use the rat-tail comb just to put the hairs into the point. You can see that the glue's not all the way down to the tips of the hair, but it's just maybe like 1/2 centimeter, 5 millimeters off the edge. You mostly want these little bits of hair to remain like, it's got hairspray in it, but you don't want it to be full of glue because then it will just kind of poke into your head a little bit while you're wearing it. It's not too bad though, because it's kind of running parallel to your scalp rather than sticking into it, but it's just always nicer to have the hair just being a little bit softer if you can. So we're just doing what I did earlier, just feather cut, brush the hairs out, spray the side, put the tacky glue down, use your rat-tail comb to distribute the glue throughout, clip, hairspray, then do your little points if you want to do that. Spray it down and just use your hairdryer to set the hairspray, really keeping that in place. And just go ahead and keep doing the same thing, making sure to follow the way you've cut your little hairline to inform the direction of your hair. If you didn't want to do this, there's ways you can just mark it in with maybe a chalk pencil or something like that, just to make sure that you know which way you're doing your hair. Smooth it down, spray it, hair dry it. Just move on to the next piece. When you start working in larger chunks, it's better to work with more clips. So you can use a clip a bit further up to clip down the first couple that you've did, and then use another clip to clip down your new one. So you can see that I've incorporated another clip to do that for me. So you're not really messing with too many other ones. With this one, because it's right on the edge and because there was a bit of a weird patch a bit further up, I added a bit more glue to the wig just to really make sure it doesn't move. But this area also won't be seen. I use a clip here just to hold down these parts. This isn't necessary, but if you have some tricky hair that just wants to jump up all the time, do that. You will probably need to go in there and give it a little smooth though. After you wait a couple of hours, the glue's still wet, but it's thickened up a little bit, so you can still probably pull the hairs off if you needed to, but it's going to stay down well enough that you can take clips off, and if you need to, just give it a little bit of a nudge. Just follow on with the same method. Because of the way this hairline is and the way I want the part line, I'm working in sections. So I'm leaving this middle section open because I want, and doing the side section first on the right, because I want the hair to overlap that and just follow that part line. So rather than doing it all uniformly, I want it to sort of come up in a different way. So you can see the hair sort of jumping away from the felt there, so a bit of hairspray, hair drying, keeps it down, add a clip just to kind of keep it there. You see later I remove it because it's not really necessary, it's just for the moment while the hair's cooling down. So do your feather cut, brush it out, spray it either side. There's some glue left, but I add a bit more. Pop it down, use your rat tail comb to smooth it out. The hairs are a little bit long here, so if you want to go in and trim them, you can. I prefer to trim them, have them as close to what I want them to look like beforehand, rather than trimming them like this, because you get quite a blunt cut out of doing this. So unless that's the style you're going for, you kind of learn by doing, in a sense, like seeing what you like the best and stuff like that. Personally, I prefer the hairs to sort of be a bit more feathered. Once this all dries, I'll end up taking it off anyway and trimming it. It also means less work for you a bit later, especially when with having dried glue and hairspray in it, it's a bit harder to cut through. Once you've got your two main sections in place, just make sure that your hairs are laying how you want them to. It's always best to fan it out towards the edges where your clips are, because you don't want them turning into like chunks, because you're going to want to spread it out a bit nicer when you style it. So now I'm moving on to filling in these two gaps, so this little like sideburn area, and then I'll do the middle section. So just trimming and spraying and putting the glue in the spot. The other side doesn't have a little sideburn area like this, obviously, because it's not going to be visible where the bang falls, so it's not necessary to do. So I just lay it down and curl it around the edge here, because I want the hair to fall against the face, but I want it to meet the hairline. If you look at how your normal hairline is, it sort of comes straight and then down. Just adding a small piece in here because there's a little gap. Don't be afraid to, don't try and like fill the whole area in one go if you're not comfortable doing it. It's always okay just to go in and add a small section. That's the beauty of this entire method, is that if there's parts that you're not quite happy with, don't panic about it. You can always come back and add a little bit more if you have enough hair. So I'm just adding a small piece of hair. This part doesn't go straight down to the hairline because it's part of the section on the right. So I'm just gluing it in along the part line. I end up gluing in another piece a little bit further up as well. You don't want this coming from the hairline because that's not where this hair comes from. It comes from the part in the middle of the head. So you want the direction of the hair to flow into the rest of the wig, if that makes sense. You don't want it to be super obvious that you've kind of like glued all this extra hair on. So here's that little extra piece. It's at a bit more of an angle, you can see. It's just kind of, and I'm using my rat tail comb just to really push the hairs in underneath that swoopy bang, just to be part of that part line. There's not as much glue as what I've put on the felt. I've kind of just put a little bit of glue on the end and squished it off with my fingers, and then used the rat tail comb to poke it in there, because I want it to adhere and I want it to be fully soaked, but I don't want to have the glue show through the front. You can see with the section that I glued at the beginning on the left how a lot of the glue's dried and you can't see it, but there's some stuff on the far left where there's a couple of dark spots. That's because there's a little bit too much glue in those areas. That's okay because we'll be adding extra hair, and it's also okay because that area is going to get covered anyway. You can see I'm using the elastic again just to hold that piece down because I don't really have a clip that's going to fit in that area or not pull it up. I need it to be pressed down as tight as it can. So I use the elastic and some pins. So I'm just doing the same as what I did earlier, starting from the left and moving across to the right because that part's going to overlap. Just feather cut it, brush it out, spray it, stick it down, and use your rat tail comb to smooth it down. So I'm putting a bit more spray in this area because it's kind of come up a little bit, just to really stick it down because I need it to be flat, not give away the magic of what's happening here. Bit of tacky glue over the felt and over the hair, spray either side and lay it down in this section. The narrowness of the tail on the comb helps you really kind of push each hair around individually almost. You can really manipulate the direction of how the hair is going and push it all back together we're just getting this last piece, and this is the piece that's going to overlap, so I end up removing that piece of elastic because it's going to get glued in between it otherwise. And there's been enough pressure on the other piece of glue that it's going to stay there. And you can see the hair has sort of overlapped that piece that I added earlier where the elastic was holding it down. Just blow drying it down so it's stuck. You can see there's a nice little overlap there. So this is the amount of hair I had left after I had done everything. You definitely want to have a bit of hair left over, because what we're going to do now is we're going to find the areas that there's some gaps that we're not entirely happy with, and we're going to fill that in. So I'm just pushing the hair to the side how I want it. On the right, it's going to be pinned in that place. Just seeing how everything falls, and I'm just unpinning, taking the clips out and just seeing how the hair falls, where my gaps are, where I need some more. I'm using my little bristle brush to smooth it out, adding some spray behind, almost using it kind of like a spray adhesive, just getting it on the back side as well, really sticking it down so it adheres to the teasing we did underneath, because we don't want any of that visible from the front. You can see the little gaps between each section that I did. That's sort of a risk you run when you work in small sections, but that's fine. So I added a bit of tacky glue behind it because I want this piece to stay up, but you don't want to put as much tacky glue as you put down below, because you don't want that. You definitely don't want that showing through the front. You just want it kind of holding onto the back of it. So I'm just spraying this area, really solidifying that the area where the hair meets the hairline. Just going through and trimming some extra hair. Now this follows the same method as what we did already. We're just not adding any tacky glue. So there's no tacky glue there. You're just spraying either side of it, and you're just laying it down over the section. Because there's already some hairspray on, there's quite a lot of hairspray on the surface of that, it's gonna stick. So you just kind of spray it either side, lay it down, and just follow the same method as what you're doing before. Spray it and just hair dry it. And we're just going to do that, and we've got to cover all those little gaps, and if there's any dark spots from the glue, we're going to cover those as well. You want the hair to be a little bit offset from the edge, not too far, but just not bang on the top, because we want to maintain that feathered look. So you can see it's not quite, it's just a little bit back from the edge there. It's a bit hard to see, but you can see the result that we're getting is that it's not too much hair. We're not adding bulk, we're just covering things. So feathering the hair sort of helps it blend into the feathered hair that's already there. You're just adding it a little bit back from the edge, a couple mil back from the edge. So this method is up to you whether or not you want to do it, depending on the materials available to you or the style. But I like to use a spray adhesive. Once I'm sure that everything is set where I want it to be, the spray adhesive almost acts like a stronger version of the hairspray. It's a lot more permanent too. So what I do here is I use a piece of paper to protect the loose hair, because I definitely don't want to get any on that, because once there's glue on that, it's not coming off. I sort of use this spray adhesive to go along the edge of the hair. I'm just going along the hairline just to really concrete it in place. The hair on the right, in that section that's pulled off to the side, is going to get pinned down. Earlier, I put a bit more glue underneath that, similar to how I put some glue underneath on the left piece, just to really help keep that aside. And I'm just adding an extra section in there because it just bothered me looking at it how the hair didn't quite meet up with the hair from the back of the head. Now, adding this extra piece just makes it look like it flows in a bit nicer. And then you want to leave that overnight, or at least a good day, just to really give a chance for all the glue to set up before you even think about styling it. The last thing you want to do is style it and pull anything out of place.